Strength training is a key ingredient to preventing injury and maximizing our performance as runners. But unfortunately, most runners that are doing some sort of strength training aren't doing it well. So in today's video, I'm going to give you 5 simple strength training tips specifically designed for runners so that you can prevent injury and maximize your running performance. Hi guys, welcome to Stout Sport Performance. Austin Stout here. We're going to be talking today about how you should be strength training as a runner. Now this is going to be really important if you're somebody that covers a lot of miles, a lot of kilometers within your week of training, but it's going to be helpful to people that run on a consistent basis as well. We're going to have to start this conversation by trying to shift the paradigm of how we think about strength training in a running community. So first and foremost, we know, and most runners do a decent job of knowing, that we need to resistance train if we're going to help prevent injury and maximize our running performance. But unfortunately, one of the mistakes that a lot of runners make, especially runners that are covering large distances, is they make the assumption that when we go to the gym, we should be performing endurance-based training exercises. And in my opinion, this is a mistake. If we think about our ability to adapt to stress, we only have a capacity to adapt to so much stress in a certain period of time. That's why in any training program, we have times where we have increased levels of volume and we reduce the intensity so we can adapt to that. And we have other times where we increase the intensity and usually reduce our total volume. And so if we think about endurance as a bucket of water, and we can only pour so much training into that bucket that we're going to be able to adapt to before it overflows. If we're somebody who's running a lot, we're pouring into that bucket all the time and we're filling that endurance adaptation bucket. So when we go to do our strength training sessions, if that's 2 times a week, you should probably aim for 2 strength-based trainings a week if you're a long-distance runner, if you do some endurance-based sport. And if we go to the strength training session, we try to perform then additional endurance-based work, so we're performing sets of 12, 15, 20 repetitions for different exercises, then we're trying to fill an already full bucket. We're not going to have as successful adaptation to that endurance-based strength training as we would think we would, because we're already doing so much endurance-based training outside of the gym. So the first tip that I'm going to have for you is that you're going to want to focus your training in the gym on strength and power. We're going to want to bring down the number of repetitions probably to about 8. We can stay at that 8 range because maybe we want to try to maintain some level of hypertrophy within the body. But we're going to want to try to focus almost even lower than that in rep ranges of about 6. And this is going to be a good way for us to try to fill a different bucket. Make sure we're still maintaining our strength, working on building our power, and all of those things are going to have a positive effect on our ultimate performance as well as help us to prevent injury. So we're going to fill different buckets and stay away from just performing strength training, which is focused on improving your muscular endurance. Because like I've said, that's not a bad idea in principle, but we're already filling a bucket that's too full. We filled that endurance bucket with our running and with our long distance training throughout the week. Now, the second thing that we're going to do is we're going to try to focus on performing some unilateral exercise within our training, right? This is just a functional thing in general. We spend all of our day on one leg. We walk by moving from one leg to another. We run by being on one leg and moving to another leg. So we're going to want to perform unilateral-based strength exercises to help us strengthen in a way that translates better to the positions of our body throughout running. So for an example, we could perform a goblet split squat where we pin this weight here against our chest, and theoretically it would be heavy enough that we can only perform about 8 repetitions. And we're going to perform some single leg split squats here from the goblet position, trying to gain strength within that single leg pattern. So we know now we're going to try to train for strength and power. We're going to try to do some unilateral based exercise because it translates better to our ability to run. And the third thing we're going to want to do is plyometric based exercise. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to do some dedicated jumping and landing mechanics work. Now that could be as simple as performing some box jumps or jumping over hurdles and focusing on our landing. Again, in this case, we're going to try to work on some single leg jumps, bounds, and hops And there's a million different exercises you can perform to do this. Feel free to drop some questions in the comments. If you have any, I can give you some examples of exercises. But the reason we want to include these plyometrics into our gym-based training is because running is really just a series of single leg jumps or bounds from one leg to the next. So if we're going to be able to run with good quality, we certainly have to be able to jump and bound with really good quality. And doing this in a gym gives us a great way to focus on the quality of our jumping, the quality of our bounding, making sure that we can do those things with a high quality so that when we get out and we're doing running and we're in some of those late miles and kilometers of our running, we know that we have reliable running-based patterns ingrained into our body. So we're going to want to do some plyometric-based work. Now, the last thing that we're going to focus on when we go to the gym is making sure that we're getting some mobility-based work in. Now, this is really important if you're somebody that's working in an office and running is your primary way of exercising at the end of the day. Because what often happens is we spend too much time in seated positions, our glutes can fall asleep to the responsibility that they have to extend our hip, which in running is extremely important. We take a step, our glutes are going to be responsible for helping us extend that hip into an extended position. And if our glutes are failing to do that because of lack of mobility that often comes from this hip due to seated based positions, then we're going to have some real problems in the quality of our run. We might have some compensations that come from the hamstring to help us extend the hip. We might end up extending from the lower back, and all those things can lead to some degree of pain, reduced performance, and nagging injury. So we're going to want to focus on mobilization, and in this case, we're going to want to focus on specifically exercises and mobilizations that are going to help us extend the hip and then re-engage that glute to hip extension connection. And again, if you guys have questions, you want example exercises of mobilizations you can perform, please drop a comment and then we can make some videos to discuss that as well. So in summary here, if you're a runner and you want to train for injury prevention and maximum performance, we're going to want to start by making sure we fill other buckets. We're not going to go to the gym and just work on endurance-based training because we're already getting a lot of that in our normal training. We want to try to fill some things that we're not doing. Get some strength work in, get some power-based exercises in. The second thing we're going to do is train in a unilateral fashion, meaning we're training on one leg, we're training with one arm, we're doing one arm pulls, one arm pushes, split squats, single leg straight leg deadlifts, things of that nature to make sure that we're training in a way that's going to help translate to our running and our unilateral based sport and activity that we're performing. Then we're going to want to make sure we do some plyometrics because running is just a series of single leg jumps or bounds from one leg to the next, so we need to make sure that we can jump and bound with high quality. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we're doing some dedicated mobilization work specifically to help us re-engage that glute into high-end hip extension. That's going to be really important. If you're somebody that spends a lot of time in seated postures, you need to work on your hip extension. You need to remind your glutes that they're responsible for extending your hip. So thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a comment if you have any questions, and we will see you next time.